Common Core. And of course, the first two that will be evaluated are Pearson and McGraw-Hill. Remember, they're the ones who wrote the tests. They're the ones who are writing the curriculum. And we don't know, it's only going to be successful if the curriculum and tests line up to the standards. The tests and standards already are in alignment. All we got to do now is align the curriculum, and then it's everything. How long will this take?
It would be great if our education stuff worked, but that we won't know for probably a decade.
10 years. To see if this is the biggest proposed change to education probably ever, certainly in our lifetime, and we have to wait 10 years to see if it's going to work. Some of you people look like young mothers, especially on this side. We don't have 10 years. I have 2 kids in 4th grade. I don't have 10 years. Common Core is being rolled out to almost 50 million kids at the same time without ever having been tested. It's incredible what has happened. PBS says a major experiment is underway in American public education. What if it doesn't work? According to bestschools.org, none of the top 50 best private day schools in America advertise they use Common Core. Common Core is for our kids. Obama's kids are not in Common Core. Arnie Duncan's kids are not in Common Core. John King from New York, the people from Pearson Education, Bill Gates, none of their kids are in Common Core. And none of the top 50 best schools in the country use Common Core. Common Core is not for their kids, it's for our kids. How did the standards get written and by whom? There were 3 steps. And this is really important, and some people have said that it doesn't matter. It does matter, and you'll see why it matters, I think. The first step were the work groups. Of the 5 lead writers of Common Core, none ever taught K-12. And none ever wrote K-12 standards. These are the 5 people that changed education in this country. None of them were teachers. And of the 29 people involved, none were current K-12 teachers. So who wrote the standards? Mostly the testing companies. ACT, college testing, College Board, college testing, Achieve Inc., which is a private nonprofit in DC, and Student Achievement Partners. So those are the 15 people who wrote the math standards. The 3 lead writers are in red. Same thing with the English Language Arts standards. 14 members, mostly ACT, SAT, and these 2 nonprofits out of Washington, D.C. That's who wrote these standards. And when the proponents tell you this was written by teachers, it's not true. Here it is. Everything in my presentation is fact-based. I've got all the links at the bottom of the pages. I make it available. I'll post it on Facebook after this, and if I can read your email, I'll email it out. The standards were written behind closed doors. No minutes were ever released. Here's the qualifications of David Coleman. This is the single most important person in American public education, and here they are introducing him back in 2011. Listen to his qualifications.
Has been involved in virtually every step of setting the national standards, and he doesn't have a single credential for it. He's never taught in an elementary school, I think. I actually don't know. He's never edited scholarly journal, but I think he has written scholarly papers, and a variety of other things that everybody here has done some of. He hasn't done.
I guess that would be hilarious if this wasn't so serious. Here's David Coleman's response. Remember, he's now the president of the College Board, so now he's messing up the SAT and all the AP classes.
You'd think someone with Lauren's experience would understand you never tell the truth when you're introducing someone.
Wouldn't that be funny if this wasn't so serious? Okay, that was step one, was writing the standards. Step two was the feedback. On the feedback committees, there were 33 people. One of them was a math teacher. That was on the English, or on the math feedback group. And then there were no teachers on the ELA feedback group. And the one teacher, Vern Williams, he's from a state, or she, is from a state that didn't adopt Common Core. No teachers on the ELA feedback committee. English Language Arts. And step three was the validation committee. Some called it the rubber stamp committee. Now we had a couple more teachers, one representing one of the, basically the two biggest teachers unions in the country. There was one teacher representing each of the unions, and then there was one other K-12 teacher. So that's only two K-12 teachers in the whole process that weren't representing the union. There were no early childhood educators and no mental health professionals. This becomes important in a moment. The content specialists, Dr. Milgram and Dr. Stosky, were the only mathematician or mathematics and ELA content specialists on the validation committee. And they had also written high standards in other states. Stosky, English Language Arts, Massachusetts; Milgram, Math, California. Both Stosky plus Milgram, or Stosky and Milgram, plus three others would not sign off on Common Core. You've got to remember, Stosky and Milgram are both for national standards. They're not for Common Core, though. Here's what Stosky had to say about the validation committee.
We had to sign a confidentiality agreement that we would not ever discuss what took place in the meeting itself.
When the proponents tell you this was a transparent process, remind them of this. So here's the validation committee. The 5 in red never signed off. The written objections of those 5 members were never published. They submitted their reasons, and they just never got published. To this day, they're still not published. We also don't know how the people got picked to write. The original writers in that first step, we still don't know how they got picked. We think it was Gates, but we don't know for sure. The proponents will say you can tweak the standards to make them meet our needs or their needs. That's not true. These standards, when you adopt these standards, 42 states that still have them, some have thrown them out, they adopt them 100% verbatim. These standards are copywritten. So you can't take parts of them, pull out what you like. It's all or none. 15% can be added if states chose to do that. Nevada added nothing. If the state does add something under that 15% rule, it will not be tested. Remember, the national test, they're not going to, cursive and state history aren't part of the Common Core standards. So if Nevada adds state history, which I think they might have, even though they didn't add it under the 15%, it won't be tested on the national test. There's not a big motivator for teachers to do it if it's not on the test. Now here's Dr. Milgram a year ago answering the question, who rushed the Common Core Validation Committee?
It was a budgetary question. From the federal government? From the federal government. I don't know how that happened. We were supposed to be independent of the federal government. How much influence does the federal government have then? I'm not the person you want to ask about that. I don't know. Raises a big concern. If there was such a rush at the federal level to get this through, that just opens up several more cans of worms. As long as you're aware of them, then you can look into them, and then I've done my job.
This is big. When I found this, I was shocked. That's what they said. The reason it's a problem for the federal government to be involved is because there's 3 federal laws that prohibit the federal government from directing, supervising, or controlling curricula. In March, maybe 6 months after that was filmed, that was filmed in Indiana, It was sworn testimony. It was 8 hours of testimony. Indiana became the first state to drop Common Core. Most states still don't even know this happened. At least that's the way they're acting. Back in January, Joe Heck requested a full committee hearing on the federal government's involvement in Common Core. We're going to come back to this in a minute. September, this month, a professor in South Carolina wrote an article, or it was a big fat document that said that Arnie Duncan's waivers are illegal. And I think we'll talk more about this in a minute too. Governor of Louisiana, Bobby Jindal, currently has a lawsuit against the federal government over Common Core. Okay, the standards. Dr. Milgram, quote, "There is significant international evidence that major parts of the standards will not work." Another quote from Dr. Milgram. "Common Core puts us 2 years behind high-achieving countries. Common Core stops at Algebra 2 in high school. My son finished his Common Core, if he was still, if it was already in, he would have finished his Common Core requirement as a freshman. So everything after freshman year is beyond Common Core." Dr. Evers from Stanford said that the geometry that Common Core uses is a rigid motion geometry. Quote, "It has never been successfully used in K-12 education in the United States, in any state, or in any country. There's a small region in Flemish Belgium that uses this type of geometry." Here's Dr. Milgram in that same Indiana testimony.
And again, I cannot emphasize enough that Common Core is using our children for a huge and risky experiment, one that has consistently failed when tried by individual states such as California in the early 1990s, and even countries such as the old USSR in the 1970s. That's what you're getting with Common Core. And when you take all this together, hopefully you can understand why I was unable to sign off on the document as it stood.
I want to pause right there. Dr. Milgram, he tells a story about what happened with the California math standards. Back in the 90s, the late 90s, the tech companies were noticing that the kids just weren't doing well in math. They didn't know what they were doing in mathematics. The state of California went to Dr. Milgram and I think 3 other people. I'm not sure if they were all at Stanford, but Dr. Milgram was at Stanford. And they asked these people to rewrite the math standards for the state of California. So they did. They rewrote the standards. California had some of the highest math standards in the country. And after so many years, they noticed an incredible improvement from the kids on the tests. What Dr. Milgram says, and I don't have it in here, it's a audio, it's on the Facebook page. What Dr. Milgram says is, these new standards, Common Core, is right back to what they had in California, and it failed, and the state wanted them rewritten. Now we're right back to that. Here's a professor, another professor, talking about the math. And she was somewhat involved with Common Core, but when it all shook out and when everything came down, she said Common Core fails in any comparison with the standards of high-achieving countries, just as they fail compared to the old California standards. Remember, if you've got a set of standards for everybody in the country that are the same, they can't be particularly high. Here's a few examples. 36 plus 26. Can you see that, Diane? Maybe now would be the time to turn off the light. See how that's too dark? Is that better?
Better.
Okay. 36 plus 26. So the kid, oh shucks, I didn't want to do that. The kid got the answer, but he only got partial credit, basically because he didn't convolute the problem and make it harder than it had to be. I was a math teacher. Here's another one. It's basically 83 times 27. The kids started to do the problem, and I think they realized you can't get here from here. The answer is D, so they just gave up. Again, they didn't make the problem harder than it had to be. Yeah, we'll hold on to that because Here's some division. This was posted by a 4th grade teacher, and her kid brought it home. Or maybe it was a 4th grade lesson. But anyway, it was 54 divided by 3. You had to break the 54 into 2 numbers, divide both of them by 3, and then add. What? Yeah. Welcome to Common Core. And some of the parents are seeing this now. I don't want to dwell on that. There's so much more. English language arts, cursive handwriting. David Coleman and Susan Pimentel, they ignored the research showing the positive effects of learning cursive. Because there's a lot of effects, positive effects, that show brain development, eye-hand coordination, fine motor skills. There's a lot of reasons kids should learn cursive. Not anymore. Now here's Dr. Stosky. This is the ELA specialist.
Just count. This is a simple activity. Just count the writing and the reading standards in Common Core at every grade level. This imbalance is the reverse of what a century of research indicates as the basis for the development of reading and writing skills. The foundation for good writing is good reading. Not all good readers become good writers, but all good writers have been good readers. And good reading skills are needed in every subject of the curriculum.
Basically, what she says is Common Core is the reverse of what a century of research indicates as the basis for the development of reading and writing skills. They should teach the kids to read first. Common Core has a lot of persuasive writing starting in about 1st grade. Now remember, she is responsible, Dr. Stosky is responsible for the highest ELA standards in the country, Massachusetts standards. She wrote in her paper, she said, quote, "A second flaw in Common Core's writing standards, they are an intellectual impossibility for the average middle grade student." Here she is talking about critical thinking in classic literature.
Unfortunately, Common Core has reduced the number of literary texts that English teachers will be able to teach because the mandate is for at least 50% informational reading and writing, which is not what English teachers have been trained to teach at any time in their majors or in their educational preparation programs. That division of reading instruction also diminishes the ability of students to develop critical thinking skills, which is another false claim of the Common Core standards. It will not improve critical thinking skills. It will reduce the ability to develop critical thinking skills because students will not be taught how to read between the lines of the complex literary texts they once were taught how to read.
That's part of what she said right there. English teachers in high school now half of their instruction has to be in informational text. It used to be almost all of it was nonfiction, not anymore. Here's Dr. Louisa Motz. She says the same thing. Actually, she was the one who was responsible for part of Common Core. But the way it turned out, she doesn't support. And she says it basically disregards research. The Common Core does not follow research. Sometimes you'll hear the proponents say that this is research-based, and when you get the standards and look, you don't find any standards that are connected to research. Well, actually, someone will tell you this in a minute. I'll let her do it. English language arts. This is the official New York State Common Core website. It's called Engage New York. The parents nicknamed it Enrage New York. So there's a 5th grade unit of instruction, a 3-week unit of instruction, and this is in English language arts, by the way, on the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. 3 weeks in 5th grade. So then I looked in that same official website, what is there on the Bill of Rights, which is the United States comparable to the Declaration of Human Rights from the United Nations. There's exactly 1 sentence on the Bill of Rights. It's United Nations, U.S. Now in 6th grade, in Arkansas, the kids get to revise the outdated Bill of Rights. This was an actual lesson in Arkansas for 6th graders. The lesson was to prune to and add to amendments to the Bill of Rights. Remember, it's outdated. The assistant superintendent justified the lesson saying it's critical thinking and it's part of Common Core state standards. So we're going from analyzing classic literature for our critical thinking to rewriting the outdated Bill of Rights. Here's Dr. Stosky at the Notre Dame conference a year ago. Or Dr. Koshnik, thank you.
So additionally, it's not apparent that the individual standards were tied to any research. Normally when you see something this important, you see these citations after it that have little people's names and dates, and that's because they're based on research.
So when the proponents say this is research-based, this is not research-based. While the standards were being written, 500 early childhood and education professionals, remember, they weren't involved in this whole process. They signed a letter to the NGA and CCSSO, that's who holds the copyright. And the first sentence of the letter says, quote, "We have grave concerns about the core standards for young children now being written." End quote. Well, then it goes on to say, "We call for the NGA and CCSSO to suspend their current drafting of the standards for children in kindergarten through grade 3. So how did the NGA, the National Governors Association, CCSSO, Chief Counsel State School Officers, people like Dale Urquiaga, how did they respond? In their limitation, or in their copyright, they added a limitations of liability. Basically, I'm going to read what's in red. Under no circumstances shall NGA, CCSSO be liable for any damages, even if advised of the possibilities of such risk and potential damages. We have standards that are copywritten. The people that copywrote them don't want to be responsible for them, and we're forcing them on the whole country. This is wrong. Since the standards have been released, many more early childhood educators and mental health professionals have said, especially the K-3 standards are developmentally inappropriate. It's asking young children to do what they can't do developmentally. The reason it got like that is because it went backwards. They looked at what does a kid need to know going into college, and they just went backwards. So by the time they got to kindergarten and first grade, it didn't matter if it matched where the kids were developmentally. It just mattered if it would get them to 12th grade where these handful of people thought they needed to be. And remember, college people weren't that involved either in the beginning. Here's a New York teacher, a union rep, talking to the commissioner in New York State.
In the state of New York, and as such, I am a mandated reporter. And I'm here to report that we are abusing children in the state of New York. There is now a common core syndrome. Do you understand what that means? We have children that are being diagnosed by psychologists with a syndrome directly related to work that they do in the classroom. If that's not child abuse, I don't know what is.
That's what she said. And she went on to say,
So what I'm going to tell you is, because you've awoken the mommies, you're in trouble. Hundreds of thousands of mommies are going to fill out this form, and they are going to have their children refuse to take the test. Because the mommies in New York don't abuse their children, and they're not going to let mommies.
they're pretty riled up in New York. The problem is, in New York, in Nevada, we cannot opt out of the test. Ask the governor. In New York, This last April, there were schools where over 70% of the students did not take the Common Core tests. Now granted, those schools are the schools where the superintendents and the principals have come out against Common Core, but still, over 70%. In Nevada, we can't opt out. So here's the summary of where we are. Here's what we've got. We've got a one-size-fits-all, top-down control of education. It's not written by K-12 teachers or qualified people. There's little, if any, local control. There's really no local control in the standards. It's rushed by the federal government. It's written in secret meetings. Confidentiality agreements had to be signed. The objections were never published. It's not research-based. It's never tested, never been tested. Many of the experts say the standards are inappropriate. The curriculum and the tests line up to inappropriate standards. We must accept the standards 100% as written. The SAT has been dumbed down to align with Common Core. All the AP classes will be changed to align with Common Core. It's very expensive to implement, and we have to wait 10 years to see if it's going to work. What's not to like? All right. Past the English language arts and math. In March 2014, the College Board announced that David Coleman, the SAT, will be dumbed down in 2016 to align with Common Core. Now, he didn't use those words dumbed down. Those are the words I picked and many others. But he did say this: the essay will be optional. The math will cover more basic topics. The vocabulary words will become easier, I should say, and there'll be no penalty for wrong answers. The SAT has been dumbed down to align with Common Core. This will start in 2016. Okay, science. The next generation science standards. Fordham Institute got $8 million plus from Bill Gates to support Common Core. Now here's the president of Fordham talking about the science standards in Michigan under sworn testimony. Here's what Chester Finn had to say. Yeah, Chester.
Parenthetically, my organization has recently evaluated the newly emerged common science standards, and we don't think very highly of them. Would not be encouraging states to adopt them.
They would not be encouraging states to adopt them. I guess $8 million doesn't go as far as it used to. They gave the standards a C, and they gave the NAEP and the TIMS as other science standards that are used an A-. And what they said in their written report is there's basically no math in these standards, even at the high school level. That's the science standards that we have. In addition, they teach global warming and evolution as fact with no opposing view. That's the new science standard. The Board of Education is aware of all this. Back in February, the Board of Ed, our Board of Ed, adopted these standards without parent, legislator, or taxpayer input. We have next generation science standards now. Most states are staying away from adopting these, not Nevada. I think we were like the 8th state to adopt them. Okay, so there's no social studies standards yet, but remember, David Coleman has control over all the AP classes. So all the AP classes and tests will be changed to align with Common Core. The AP World History, there's only one religion has its own chapter. It's not Christianity, folks. It's Islam. AP US History, the new AP World History, AP World History. I had this textbook on my piano for about a month. I don't know if you guys are using this down here, but probably.
Where are you on that? Yeah, we're looking for
The Second Amendment, I want to wait and get through this. It's, 87, 86, 87. Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, that has been changed in the Common Core textbooks. If you Google Second Amendment changed in elementary or middle school textbook, you'll get numerous articles about this. I'm not going to spend any more time on that. But if you're concerned about Second Amendment, Common Core changes it. You need to find out about this. I will talk about the AP US History. The new AP US History class that started this year in every state in the country that uses AP The goal was to, quote, expand on the history of the Americas from 1491 to 1607 and from 1980 to the present. Remember, this is AP U.S. history. Now, this Larry Kruger is a former AP U.S. history teacher. He's been given numerous awards by the College Board. He said, quote, APUSH is what they call it. APUSH dictates revise more than the curriculum. They appear to revise history itself. The Heartland wrote an article, quote, the new framework inculcates a consistently negative view of the nation's past. Now, Larry Kruger wrote a long article, and the link is toward the bottom, or right at the bottom of this page. Larry Kruger wrote, quote, as we have documented, the framework systematically ignores key leaders. George Washington is barely in the new AP U.S. history, neither is Abraham Lincoln. The college, and then he writes this, quote, the College Board's decision to delete Theodore Roosevelt is outrageous, inexplicable, and unacceptable. Theodore Roosevelt's not in it at all. Remember, this is AP U.S. history. Okay, he's talking about World War II. And what Larry writes is, quote, the framework provides no discussion of the rise of fascist aggression in Japan and Europe. As a result, students are not expected to learn about the Japanese invasion of Manchuria, the Munich Conference, the Nazi-Soviet Pact, the Lend-Lease Act, or Hitler's atrocities against the Jews and other groups. That's left out of the new AP U.S. history. Now here's a quote from page 59. When I read this, I couldn't believe it. I had to go to the actual document myself, and I found it. Page 59, paragraph 3B. The AP U.S. history framework says, quote, wartime experiences such as the internment of Japanese Americans, challenges to civil liberties, debates over race and segregation, and the decision to drop the atomic bomb raised questions about American values. That's in the new AP U.S. history. You cannot support some of this. You either support Common Core, all these changes, the dumber SAT, the testing. You can't just support some of it. It's a package deal. And Brian Sandoval is supporting this. Okay, then it gets worse, because what the College Board tells you is on the revised AP exam, all questions are derived from courses' stated learning objectives. In other words, if you want the kids to pass the test, remember, these are classes where kids can get college credit if they pass the test. But so the teachers, there's a lot of pressure on these teachers to get these kids to pass these AP exams. So if you want to teach about Theodore Roosevelt or George Washington or any Benjamin Franklin or Abraham Lincoln, you can do it. Your kids just aren't going to pass the test. They need to know that America's values were questioned when we dropped the bomb. They don't need to know all the stuff that led up to that decision. It's incredible what's happened. States are coming out against this, but it's already in the schools. It got announced just as school ended last year, and now it's in the schools, including Nevada schools. And there is a petition to stop it. This whole thing has to be stopped, you guys. That's why I do this. How did Common Core get adopted so quickly and quietly? Money. $4.35 billion plus waivers from No Child Left Behind. Many states, including Nevada, adopted the Common Core before the final draft was ever released. They had the earlier versions, but the final one wasn't released by the time we adopted it. And it's worse than No Child Left Behind. Back in 2009, Governor Gibbons signed the State Fiscal Stabilization Fund. That was an application for money. And what he did in that, by signing on that application, he agreed to establish the statewide longitudinal data system and improve the academic content standards, which turned into Common Core. Now, Nevada did get $266 million for that. But in taking that money, we committed ourselves to the longitudinal data system and content standards, which, like I say, turned into Common Core. We couldn't apply for Race to the Top Phase 1, but then we did apply for Race to the Top Phase 2. Governor Gibbons signed that application in May, 2009. In that application, he agreed to adopt Common Core and improve the data systems, the statewide longitudinal data system, to connect the teacher evaluations with the student test scores. 5 days after he agreed to adopt Common Core, the final version of Common Core was released. Nevada did not get the race to the top money, but Nevada is stuck with Common Core and the data system unless we can stop it. Who opposes Common Core? Governor Gibbons. Back in April, Christy Armbruster out in Elko got an email from Governor Gibbons. And here's what he said, quote, "Please understand that I currently do not support Common Core or its principal purpose, as it has changed since it was introduced and signed while I was the state's governor." So Governor Gibbons is like Governor Jindal and many other governors. They realized that this is not what they thought it was going to be. Governor Sandoval hasn't realized that yet. Here, who else opposes Common Core in Nevada? The Republican Party in Nevada, the Nevada Federation of Republican Women, numerous county Republican parties. I'm not sure if it's all of them yet, but it's many of them. And the Democrat Party in Clark County. Thank you to Christine Kramer for that. Plus, the Republican National Committee, and by the way, the Republican National Committee also opposes the new AP U.S. History, as does Texas, South Carolina, and maybe others, I'm not sure. Who supports all this mess is Governor Sandoval. That is the problem in our state. I hate to admit it because I'm a Republican. My wife isn't, but I am. But the problem is Governor Sandoval. States are now realizing Common Core is going to cost way more to implement than what they will ever receive from the federal government. The estimate, kind of a conservative estimate, to implement Common Core, $16 billion for the U.S. About $5 billion will come from federal grants. Nevada, in our state, it looks like we will spend about $13 million per year, and I believe this is for 7 years. That's what the superintendent in Washoe County said. 1.7 million, and this is just to train teachers. 1.7 million per year in Washoe County, 8 million per year in Clark County. 13 million per year just to train teachers. In Washoe County, he said it would be for 7 years. And this estimate is way low, 151 million for this state to implement Common Core. I think that's very low, but that's the only one we have. Okay, people on the left and right are starting to realize and come together on Common Core. The Huffington Post, they've written many negative articles on Common Core. And this is one that I found that was an English teacher. Common Core nonfiction reading standards mark the end of literature, English teachers say. Then you've got a conservative from Hillsdale College, Terry Moore. He has a really good 45-minute speech. Story Killers, How the Common Core Destroys Minds and Souls. These people probably wouldn't agree on much else, except that Common Core has to go. I'm going to kind of speed up here. The NPR had a good story back in January. Political rivals find common ground over Common Core. And the New York Times had a good one in May. Unlikely allies uniting to fight school changes. Back in June, the Washington Post wrote a long article, and it was very well documented. The title of and it has videos if you go to this website. The title was How Bill Gates Pulled Off the Swift Common Core Revolution. This was June 7th this year. On June 9th, both the National Review Online and the Huffington Post wrote very similar articles. One is pretty far right, one is pretty far left. The National Review Online, their article was titled Time for Congressional Hearings on Common Core. And Huffington Post article was titled Time for Congress to Investigate Bill Gates' Coup. The next day, after these two articles were written, the next day, Bill Gates wrote an article, and he said that he wanted to back off for 2 years on linking teacher evaluations to student test scores. What we've got right now in this country is we've got one rich man who is paid to control American public education. All the teachers in the United States combined do not have as much control over what they teach as one rich college dropout. That's what's happened. So back in June, Gates said, okay, well, let's give this a rest. Let's not tie the teacher evaluations to the student test scores. 2 months later, Arnie Duncan said, oh yeah, let's hold off on that. Let's hold off for 1 year. Who's really in charge here?
Gates.
So what Arnie Duncan said is states could delay for 1 year the use of test results in teacher performance rankings. We're at a critical juncture, I think, right now. A few men, it's mostly men, probably a couple women, we've allowed a few men to dictate what all the children in the U.S. need to know. This is not right. It's not the teachers anymore. It's got to be stopped, you guys. I'm getting close here. What do the experts say? Well, first of all, it's hard to find an expert that Gates didn't pay off. He's put in over $200 million. There's a professor in Georgia who thinks he's put in over $2 billion into selling Common Core. It's hard to find experts that Gates didn't pay off, hasn't paid, to support this. Here's some of them. Here's some more. The teachers' unions, both large teachers' unions took pretty good money, $8 million to the NEA, $13 million to the AFT. Back in July 4th, the NEA called for Arnie Duncan's resignation. And on July 11th, the AFT, you know, they're talking about Common Core. I listened to some good testimony at their meeting in Los Angeles in the summer. It's basically a hot issue for them too. Some oppose it, some like it. The Brookings Institute did not take any money to support Common Core. Back in 2012, what they said is, despite all the money and effort devoted to the development of Common Core, the study foresees little to no impact on student learning. March 2014, they had a follow-up report. There's no signs of an impressive accomplishment. They didn't take any money. Now here's the executive vice president of Fordham. They took a lot of money. They're kind of like the ones pushing this thing around the country. Here's what he said about a year ago. You can't see him, but you hear him.
30,000 teachers already trained in Tennessee. I always like to remind our opponents of the Common Core, we are 3 years into this thing. If we stop now, that is a lot of money we have wasted on that, a lot of time we have thrown on teachers' course. Okay, my point.
We can't stop now. We've already wasted all this money. That's incredible. Okay, the largest teachers union in the country, New York, they haven't what they said was the middle red one, the teachers union. The board withdrew its support for Common Core standards as implemented and interpreted in New York. Haven't quite come out against Common Core. And then the president of that union, he said teachers and parents are right to opt out of the Common Core tests. The Chicago Teachers Union, the third largest teachers union in the country, they have opposed Common Core. That's where Arnie Duncan and President Obama are from, is Chicago. These teachers get it. What they said is, quote, Common Core eliminates creativity in the classroom and impedes collaboration. I'm going to speed this up because it's getting to be too long. Massachusetts Teachers Association, they just elected a president who ran on a Stop Common Core platform. And it sounds like they may want their old standards back. They used to be the highest standards in the country. And just last week, Teachers Union in New Jersey came out against Common Core. Most teachers are afraid to speak up. There's a Facebook page, BATS, Badass Teachers. There's 52,000 teachers on that Facebook. They oppose Common Core. Diane Ravitch, Assistant Secretary of Education, liberal educator, she opposes Common Core. Polls. This summer, Education Next did a poll. 40% of teachers now oppose Common Core. Gallup did a poll also this summer. 60% of Americans oppose Common Core this summer. What's happening is as people discover and learn about this, they don't like it. It got snuck in, and all this money was wasted, so we can't stop now. But as people discover it, they don't like it. States' opposition to Common Core. Initially, 45 adopted it. Indiana was the first one to drop it. 2 others have since then, South Carolina and Oklahoma. 3 states are getting close. North Carolina, they're actually started to rewrite them. Louisiana, it's going to depend on the courts. In Missouri, they have a Democratic governor. They're also they're real close to getting out. And these 8 states right here, they could withdraw any time in the near future. There's all big push in all 8 of those states. At least 74% of the states that have Common Core currently have legislation pending to either stop it, not fund it, or slow it down. And I think that's higher now. This is a little bit old. All the states in red have legislation pending. I think there's actually a couple more. I don't know, maybe Montana, Vermont, Massachusetts maybe, I'm not sure. But at least the ones in red have legislation pending. And like I say, 3 of those ones in red have already backed out. The most promising news of all, Education Week wrote an article back in May. There were only 9 states left in PARCC testing. This is the way we're going to test to make sure all the kids are learning the same thing. Well, first of all, we have 2 testing consortiums. So there were 9 states left in PARCC consortium. So those 9 states could compare. But they all could have different passing rates, so they really can't compare. And there was 17 left in SBAC, which is the same thing. They can all set their own passing rate. So we really couldn't compare except for with those 17 states. But once the passing scores are changed, it doesn't even matter. But then a bunch of states backed out since May. And then Louisiana got put back in because the judge put them back in. So we think there's 22 states left in the Common Core testing. And then a lawsuit was just filed last week in Missouri over the SBAC testing. That could be big because that could impact Nevada, I hope. We'll see. Nevada's full steam ahead. It's like we don't even care what's happening in all these other states. We're the only state in the country where the president of the school board has started a education or propaganda campaign to sell Common Core to the residents of the state. Elaine Wynn. I don't know if that's a conflict of interest. What do you guys think?
Yes.
She was appointed to that position by Governor Sandoval in January 13. And according to Dale Urquiaga, the superintendent of public instruction, the governor has direct authority over education in our state. And that's true. And that's a little unusual too. Brian Sandoval has much more control over education in this state than most other states, than the governor in most other states. All right, this is the last section. This is probably the worst thing with Common Core is the data collection. Back at the end of 2011, FERPA was reinterpreted by the U.S. Department of Education. That gutting of FERPA allowed the unprecedented storage, tracking, and sharing of student data, some of it's personal, without prior parent consent. Before 2011, none of the rest of this could have happened, the rest of these slides. Here's what Joe Hart said just about a month after FERPA was gutted. Here's what Joe Hart said. This is a news reporter in Washoe County. Read
The
it.
Department of Education is receiving a $4 million grant. This grant will allow the department to follow individual students' progress from pre-kindergarten through high school all the way to the workforce. The system will help direct students to the type of college or career-ready jobs and into a field which will allow them a successful outcome for both the student and their state.
Did you catch the end of that? There it is in red. The system will help direct students to the type of college or career-ready jobs and into a field which will allow them a successful outcome for both the student and their state. I don't want the state of Nevada doing that. I would like them to teach my kids to read, write, do math, and not direct them into anything. Again, you cannot support part of this. You either support the whole thing or you don't, because that's the package that we have. We weren't given this in pieces. The whole thing was snuck in. And we got a total of $10 million, and that creates that Nevada statewide longitudinal data system. And again, it allows it to track the teachers. That's how it was sold to the Republicans, because they said, oh yeah, if we can track the teachers, this is problematic. Okay, so here's what the federal government did. They spent over $612 million to ensure that 47 states all have the same statewide longitudinal data systems. The data can be shared between states, federal government, private companies. The Reno Gazette-Journal wrote an article back in January. Here's what's going to be tracked. They were bragging about it. Quote, everything you know will be documented starting in kindergarten. Discipline files and any special concerns, psychological issues, if your kid was recommended to see a counselor, information about a home life, other personal information, including other family members' level of education. I get excited. I'm almost done though. Starting this school year, all the students in Nevada are required to take the SBAC exams. Now, why is this a problem? Because it's the SBAC, that federal government-sponsored testing consortium, that there's still what was it, 12 or however many states was left. It's the SBAC that's required to make the students' data available to the federal government and private companies, the Department of Ed, and the Government Accounting Office. It's the SBAC that's got to make that data available. Not the local school district, not the state, but the SBAC. The SBAC gets it when your kid takes the SBAC exam. So we don't know who's going to have access to this data. And we also don't know if it gets shared with the company. We won't know what companies have our kids' data. Now, Nevada's jumping through a bunch of hoops now. You're going to hear a lot about this one aspect. But in our state, we cannot opt out of the data system or the SBAC testing. Remember, there's only 22 states left in the testing. It's very easy to back out. Governor Sandoval could slow or stop this testing tomorrow. It's easy to get out of the testing. It's harder to get out of Common Core, but it's very easy to get out of the testing. Here's the document that says that we can't opt out of the testing or the data system. The first sentence in the third paragraph. In this data, it's not just K-12. This data system is meant for preschool, K-12, college, and workforce. We've never had anything like this in the United States. It's kind of like a cradle-to-grave tracking system. And it's starting with your kids and my kids. 400 data points. All of the fields aren't populated, but that's what's available. People are back, teachers and administrators against Common Core are afraid to speak up. Teachers are leaving the profession. Parents are turning to homeschooling because of this and the data collection. Initially, the state told me it would cost me over $10,000 to see what data the state of Nevada is tracking, and soon will share on my 4 children. There's the email that I got from the Department of Ed. Then they changed their mind. Then they said, oh no, even if you pay the $10,000, you can't see the data we're tracking on your children. Nevada was the first state to take this extreme and unusual position. Then the U.S. Department of Education told the Nevada Department of Education, no, you can't do that. You got to let this guy see the data you're storing on his children. I spent almost 4 hours in Carson City going over the data they're storing on my children. I still don't know what it is because a lot of it's coded. And there were numerous mistakes. My 2 older children, they had my older children at 30 different addresses. We've never moved. And then the lady, or the man that was going over the data said, well, that's not important information. I'm like, well, it might be to Stanford or MIT if they think we moved every 3 months. So I'm still trying to find out from Washoe County why. I don't know. But the state can't change it. They say it came from Washoe County like that. And the state won't give me a printout. Education Week. At least 14 states have added a feature to this data system that would provide useful information to parents. Nevada is not one of those states. Because right now, this information is not useful to parents or teachers. This is just information that's being tracked on your children. It's not useful to anybody but federal government, Pearson Education, Government Accounting Office. We really don't know the implications. First of all, no one can guarantee that this student data will be safe. So if it's not hacked, we don't even, once it's out there, we can't take this stuff back. We don't know the implications of having all this data out on our children. We have no idea. It's never happened in the United States. According to data expert Tom Fallon, just in the first quarter of 2014, there were 39 reports of data breaches at schools around the country. And this is before it all goes into one place. It's going to get much worse. You hear data breaches, every week in the news there's something. And a lot of these weren't reported in the mainstream media. They were small. The data quality campaign is also funded by Gates. They're very involved. They want this student data. Through April 16th, so just like the first 3.5 months of the year, there were 80 bills filed in 32 states. There's probably more than twice that now. There'll be bills in Nevada. To me, this is like putting a Band-Aid on a big gaping wound, because they're still collecting the data, but they're going to try to do all these things and they're going to say that the state has control. I don't believe any of it. What they did was deceitful. What they're going to do now is going to be deceitful. Ben Swan wrote a really good article. He's a reporter from the Midwest. The article was titled, well, it's on his website. Somebody else wrote it. The title, "The Most Dangerous Domestic Spying Program is Common Core." It's awful. There's never been anything like this. They really want to know about the discipline of your kids. They want to know about the psychological, the income. There's 400 data points plus. The only way to protect the children in Nevada, stop the statewide longitudinal data system. Withdraw from the SBAC testing. Governor Sandoval could do that tomorrow. And stop Common Core. Okay, what can you do to help? We have money. This trip, for me to come down here and do this, we thought it was going to be like $220. When I checked in the hotel, I found out it's more like $240 because they wanted another $20. You guys have some local tax or whatever, I don't know. We need money to do this. You know, I'm not getting paid for this. I'm taking time off of work to do this. Nobody's sponsoring us. We just raise money wherever we go. We need money. That's our entity, Stop Common Core Nevada, if you want to write a check. Is someone passing around a bucket or something? A bucket, a cup, a hat? Could we start that? Could someone carry it around? Email. If you want this presentation, if we have your email in the back, I will email this presentation out within the next couple of days. And it'll also be posted on Facebook. Our website is stopcommoncorenevada.com. Our Facebook page is Nevadans Against Common Core. We're up to like 660, 670 right now. This is the way we can get the word out the quickest right there is the Facebook. A national website is truthinamericaneducation.com. And there's a movie, commoncoremovie.com. It's not quite as negative as my presentation, but it is out there. Red t-shirts, $10. We wear them to protests and stuff, so we have them in the back, all sizes. So if you want a red t-shirt, please make sure you pick one up. We really got to speak up and spread the word. Mothers and grandmothers need to know about this. People don't know what's going on. Write articles, attend meetings, Board of Education meeting. Tomorrow, we're going to go to the Board of Education meeting with our red shirts. If you can come, please come. 9 o'clock, we'll be there. Speak up if you can, especially if you haven't. I don't know if I'm going to speak. They know what I think. I'm just going to go there with a red shirt. I haven't seen a meeting here. Local board meetings, political functions. Also tomorrow, I know I'm going to be on with Rory Reed and Amy Tarkanian at 12:30. So I'll be on that program with my red shirt, 12:30 to 1. Find out where your candidates stand. What we're finding is that most candidates are afraid to say they're for Common Core. So on our webpage in the bottom left, there's a little tab where you can click to see where your candidates stand on this. MPRI, they've been somewhat helpful, and I think someone wrote a good article. She's here. There she is right there. Thank you. She wrote about the $10,000, right? Christine Kramer has done more to educate people on Common Core than any legislator or candidate in Nevada.
Hear, hear.
Now, we had a guy in the north. Christine, of course, is a Democrat. Rob Archie is a Republican. He didn't get through the first step. There were 3 in that race. He got weeded out, but there's still one in there running against Randy Kerner, who opposes Common Core. But no one has done as much as Christine to date that I know of. Governor Sandoval, he's the problem. He's the only one who can stop or slow this. He hasn't said one word about this since we've really started this. There's his phone number, there's his emails, and to me, this is a very negative subject. I mean, I'm sorry to be the one to bring in all this bad news, but the problem is, it's fact-based. These are the facts. So, I can't change the facts. This was a small rally we had in Carson. The next one will be much bigger, I'm sure. But I'm just presenting the facts. So I'm sorry it's a negative issue, but
Thank you very
those
much.
are the facts.
Yeah.